President Buhari in New York to attend the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly.
Federal government mulls policy to revive textile and garment industries.
We have the largest market of textile in the whole of the world.
Nigerian Army commences Operation Positive Identification in Adamawa, Borno and Yobe states to track fleeing terrorists.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall take a look at matters arising from the CBN's latest Monetary Policy Committee resolutions.
The Monetary Policy Committee MPC of the Central Bank of Nigeria rose from its 269th meeting last Friday and voted that monetary policy rate, which is a determinant of interest rate, should remain at 13.5%.
That's right, Kieran. And of course, this is the third consecutive time that the committee will retain the MPR, that's the monetary policy rate, since March 2019, when it was reduced by 50 basis points after more than 2 years of being pegged at 14%.
Now, this time around, besides retaining the MPR at 13.5%, the CBN's Monetary Policy Committee also retained the cash reserve ratio, CR, at 22.5%, liquidity ratio at 30%, and asymmetric corridor at plus 200 minus 500 basis points.
Now, according to Godwin Emefiele, that's the central bank governor, the MPC chose to retain the MPR because tightening it in the midst of a fragile growth outlook would increase the cost of credit, while on the other hand, losing it might heighten inflationary tendencies. And all 9 members of the Monetary Policy Committee at the meeting voted in favor of retaining the rates.
And the CBN's Monetary Policy Committee, which has a policy jurisdiction of influencing borrowing rates and foreign exchange matters, also used the occasion of its latest meeting to express its support for the Federal Executive Council's decision to increase value-added tax from 5 to 7.5%, saying it would reduce the budget deficit and government borrowing when implemented.
Of course, Kirian, now that positions taxpayers as major contributors to government financing. And don't also forget that the policy committee also advocated the need for government to raise revenues by releasing what it referred to as redundant public assets through an efficient and effective privatization process.
In fact, Kingsley, the committee urged the federal government to adopt other ways of funding its operations outside the banking sector so that credit can be directed towards the private sector, particularly the SMEs, which are drivers of any economic growth.
Also, the committee, in anticipation of early commencement of the processes leading to the preparation of the 2020 appropriation bill, that's for next year, advised the National Assembly to exercise restraint in increasing the oil benchmark for the 2020 budget, since crude oil prices, according to the MPC, are projected to remain pretty tight.
So what were the major considerations for the MPC resolutions, and what impact will these resolutions have on the economy? These are some of the questions our guests will, of course, respond to on today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kirian Umayo. Thank you for joining us. And, of course, I'm with my colleague.
All right, Kirian, thanks a lot for being around. I'm Kingsley Osadolo. We'll thank our viewers also for tuning in to the program, reaching you as always live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're right here at the Abuja headquarters studios. In the course of the program, we have our traditional segments. These include newspaper review, business, and others. Kirian, just by the way, with regard to the issues we'll be examining with our guests course, on account of the resolutions of the Monetary Policy Committee. We talked already about VAT, that's the CBN lending its support to the move by government to raise it from 5 to 7.5%. We also, of course, talked about retaining a 13.5%, you know, for the MPR. But there's also another crucial issue there that came out. The CBN governor did make remarks with regard to the cashless policy, that depositors above 500,000 naira of cash will have to pay a certain surcharge. So that's one of the issues that emerged.
That is actually strange, you know, in the nation's economy. But at least by the time this program unfolds, we're able to appreciate the reasons given by the committee for such resolutions.
And then, of course, it looks like a dead horse has been revived. If you recall, a couple of years ago, there were suggestions for the government to sell off so-called redundant assets, and at that time public opinion was dead against it. But this time the Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee says, look, government should proceed with it in order to free up funds for the country's use and development. So that's our outlook for our conversation segment this morning. In the meantime, let's join Nolene Ebelame for the highlights of the morning news. Good morning, Nolene.
Good morning, Kingsley and Kieran. Good morning, Nigeria. Here is the early morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari is in New York, United States, ahead of the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly beginning on Tuesday. The president will be addressing the Global Forum for the 5th time since coming to power in 2015.
It's like it's Nigeria's day in the sun, because you don't have it better than that. The Deputy Secretary General, President of the General Assembly, and then you are President of that country. It's like all focus will be on Nigeria.
A high-powered federal government delegation has begun consultations in the United Kingdom on how to obtain a stay of execution on the court ruling in the interim, while ultimately making a case for it to be set aside.
We're here to strategize on how we would ensure that the enforcement is set aside and we get leave to appeal the case. While we're here, we also intend to change narrative by visiting the major media houses, financial institutions, to let them know the true narrative about this P&ID contract and the fact that it's more than it's been falsely circulated by the P&ID people. We are here strategizing both on the legal and on the PR aspect of the case.
Civil servants from all establishments converged on Living Faith Church, Jahi, Abuja to give thanks to God after another year of God's grace, mercy and love. The interdenominational church service is part of activities marking the 2019 Civil Service Week in Nigeria.
We're all alive, and it's a time for us to reflect on our achievements as civil servants and also work out strategies on how to transform the civil service. God is the one behind the scene, working to make everything that we see in our civil service today. Things are working because God is at work.
12 years after the launch of Nigeria's satellite into space, many Nigerians are yet to key into its broadband potential. This has spurred the agency in charge, Nigeria Communications Commission, to go back to the drawing board to bridge this digital gap.
Expect people to come. No. To almost 40 million people without access to broadband. With this, if we'll be able to bridge that gap, it will increase our GDP. Contribution of ICT to our GDP is 13.86%.
Statistics indicate that Nigeria's local production of fertilizer is expected to hit 4 million tons by the end of this year, with plans to export excess to West African countries for revenue generation. The Minister of Agriculture, Mohammed Sabona Nono, says in addition, government has begun the implementation of a policy towards reviving the country's textile and garment industries.
It's the one that employs the largest number of youths in the country and creates the longest value chain, very sustainable value chain. And it is only in this country that you can allow this thing to happen, because we have the largest market of textile in the whole of the world.
And on security, the Theatre Command Operation Lafia Dole has commenced an operation codenamed Operation Positive Identification. A statement by the Acting Director, Army Public Relations, Operation Lafia Dole, Colonel Ado Issa, indicates that the operation is aimed at searching and arresting fleeing suspected Boko Haram and ISWAP members. Consequently, members of the public are enjoined to always have valid means of identification when moving or passing through Adamawa, Borno and Yobe states, as troops have begun instruction to strictly check valid means of identification like national identification card, voter registration cards, driver's license and international passports or any other official identification before allowing passage. Meanwhile, 18 members of a notorious cult group have been arrested in Maiduguri, Borno State. A statement by the Acting Director, Army Public Relations, Operation Lafia Dole, Colonel Ado Issa, indicates that 3 soldiers and some alleged students of the University of Maiduguri were among those apprehended. The arrested soldiers were tried in accordance with the military law, dismissed and handed over to the police with the other suspects. The statement noted that the arrest, sequel to credible information, was a joint operation involving troops of the Nigerian Army, Super Camp, Mulai, and other security agencies. And those are the news highlights for now. Good morning. Nigeria continues with Kirian and Kingsley after this break. I am Nolin Ebel Ame. Good morning.
This is to notify candidates who applied for Ahmadu Bello University and NTA TV College degree program in mass communication for 2019-2020 academic session that the post-UTME screening exercise has been scheduled to take place on Saturday, 21st September 2019. Venue, NTA TV College premises, Rayfield, Jos. Time, 9 a.m. Screening fee, 2,000 Naira paid through the remitter platform in favor of NTA TV College Jos. Candidates who chose the college as second and third choices in the 2019 UTME examination scored 180 and above and willing to study at the college can also come for the exercise. Candidates who satisfy the above requirements are expected to come along with the originals of their O-level certificate, any of WAEC, NECO, or NABTEP, JAM slip, birth certificate, indigenship certificate, and proof of payment. Direct entry candidates are expected to come along with their original diploma certificate, A-level results in addition to other credentials mentioned above. Registrar, Announcer.
Download the exciting new Indomitables game on Google Play Store. Search the Indomitables on Play Store and download now. Indomie noodles, tasty nutrition, good for you.
There's a smarter way to live with Airtel Binge Plan, the ideal data plan for those heavy data moments. Get a 2 GB daily binge plan for 500 Naira. Dial *141# to activate. Live smarter with data.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
Imagine a luxury big breakfast on top of the world in Dubai.
To Dubai.
Collins!
Hope you bought enough big milk. To be one of the 20 lucky people going to enjoy a peak breakfast in Dubai, buy Peak Milk and collect your scratch card to redeem your instant win. Fill your details and return. Everyone's a winner. So keep on buying your Peak Milk and keep winning. Valid while stocks last. Reach for your peak.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Prince, did you hear that?
Of course I did. That is Village Elmaster tune.
So, Auntie Amebo was not gossiping then?
Village Elmaster is celebrating 50 years.
50? Already? This is not a joke.
It is a national celebration. NTA and Village Elmaster family are commemorating 50 years.
Hey, Prince, tell me, when is our golden jubilee?
It is from the 8th to 11th of October 2019.
I have to go and get ready. It's time to party.
Women. But we, men, will be there too.
Prince.
All right, you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria. To business for of the day, the Accountants Conference has advised the Federal Inland Revenue FIRS to follow due process and respect taxpayers' rights in its drive to increase revenue in the country. Details of this and more with Abdul Karim Zulmi.
Against the backdrop of plans to increase value-added tax from 5 to 7.5%, as recently approved by the Federal Executive Council, the Accountants Conference has advised the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, to respect taxpayers' rights in the processes prior to implementation. Some of these rights include considering special circumstances that affect liabilities of the taxpayer, the ability of taxpayers to pay the new rate, as well as the right of the taxpayer to be properly informed about the proposed increase. Meanwhile, the Federal Inland Revenue Service has recently issued letters of substitution to commercial banks, which aims to empower them as tax collecting agents for specific listed customers or affected companies. This is part of measures to improve tax revenues by limiting incidences of tax evasion. As at close of trade week on 20th September 2019, market capitalization decreased to 505.91 billion naira from last week's previous 514.64 billion naira, which shows a 1.69% decrease in capitalization. Also, the NSI for the week ended recorded a decrease from 716.33 points to 704.19 points. With business news, Abdul Karim Zurmi.
Thank you very much, Abdul Karim Zurmi, for the business package. Next for us on the program, we'll take a look at the stories on the front pages of the papers we have this morning.
And here we welcome Bayo Altoyabi, our newspaper reviewer. Bayo, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kirian. Good morning. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Bayo, good to see you.
Yeah,
Had a pleasant weekend.
Yes. That's three national dailies for review this morning. First, let's begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. Daily Trust newspaper from top to bottom. $9.6 billion judgment, ex-CJN Belgore may be arraigned in FCT court. Is on page 3. NMPC, FIRS, DPR, others remitted 28.58 trillion naira to Federation account in 5 years. Page 22 is where you get details of that story. Now, body of missing Commodore found in well. It's on page 4. Now, the lead story on the Daily Trust is a Kaduna power plant stalled for 10 years. And of course, details on page 6. All right, at the bottom, we have a governorship polls. Lado, Ashiru, others head to appeal court. It's on page 17. Terror war. Army launches new operation in Northeast. Page 10, Why I Killed My Mother-in-Law, 2 others. It's on page 64.
All right, let's take a look at the front page of the Punch newspaper. Punch newspaper, the lead story is, of course, on the $9.6 billion judgment, which is the kicker for the headline. Malami, IG Emefiele lead federal government team to UK legal battle. With a rider, P&ID submits list of targeted Nigerian assets Thursday. The story is in greater detail on page 2. Now, beside the name flag, you have 2 earpieces there. Kirian read one of them already from the other paper. Female military officer killed and corpse dumped in well. That's on page 58. On page 32, Russian firm offers to put Ajaokuta into operation. Now, above the nameplate, there are 4 headlines. Nigeria to earn $6.35 billion in taxes and royalties. That's attributed to the NNPC. Zamfara bandits release nursing mother and 30 others. That's page 56. And Jenkos may halt operations over new administrative charge. That's page 32. My parents waiting to sell South African properties. That's according to a 17-year-old returnee. That story is on page 2. Now, the bottom half of the paper, you can see a collage of photographs there. There's 4 killed, 74 arrested in Lagos cult clashes. Those clashes took place in the Tire and the Korodu areas of Lagos. And then you must carry ID cards, Army tells Northeast residents. That's page 58. Ex-government's massive fraud cost Kogi's irregular salary. That's according to Adeyemi. I was nicknamed senior copper during NYC orientation. 60-year-old US-based Nigerian. Details of that the human interest story can be found on page 3. Now, doctors and dentists face tribunal over professional lapses. Lightning kills 36 cows grazing on Ondo sacred land. Olakunrin's murder. Afenifere berates police for poor investigation. Page 55. Bayo.
Well, talking about murder, let's talk about what was reported from Jaji. 2 persons have already been arrested in complicity with the murder of the commandant of the Command Secondary School of the Armed Forces Staff College, Jaji. A senior naval officer, Commander Oluyemisi Ogundana, was reported missing Friday. Efforts to reach her through her telephone indicated that her phone was ringing in her room. When they forced the door open, they found blood stains on her bed, on her clothes, as well as the floor leading from the bedroom to the bathroom. Her SUV vehicle was missing, but 2 persons were arrested in Zaria as they were trying to dispose of the SUV van. Apparently, when the suspects were arrested, some persons, including the staff and her personal staff, were said to have apparently murdered her, dismembered her body, packed it in a sack, and threw it in a shallow well in a village called Angwan Yolo. The poor woman, her 3 children are with her husband, probably holidaying in Lagos. Meanwhile, 15 other persons too, including 2 women and 13 men, have been arraigned over a plot to kill former First Lady Dame Patience Jonathan. Bayelsa Police Command has arraigned 15 of them on a 17-count charge. The accused persons and others at large were accused of initiative to kill Dame Patience Jonathan, steal items, valuables, including bangles worth about 3 billion, stole 7 gold bangles, 5 air conditions, 6 TV sets, and several other items. They pleaded not guilty to the 17-count charges. Meanwhile, the Daily Trust reports that a former Chief Justice of Nigeria may be arraigned before an FCT court today. This is sequel to an investigation that has revealed that he was in consultancy services for process and industrial development, the PID, that is demanding 9.6 billion of Nigerian assets. During the case that got the debt judgment for 9.6 billion, the former CJN was said to have given evidence and served as the consultant to the company. Also quizzed are a deputy manager of the National Petroleum Investment Management Services, a subsidiary of NNPC, and 10 others. A former legal director, Department of the Petroleum Resources, Grace Tiger, was ordered to be remanded in prison. The AFCC had arraigned her for allegedly receiving $20,000 to ensure that the P&D contract was successful. Her bail application is to be heard September 25th. Meanwhile, the Nigerian delegation has left Nigeria for United Kingdom to discuss with its legal team in the process of challenging the $9.6 billion awarded against Nigeria. Federal government is to seek a leave of the UK court to set aside that judgment.
You see, that judgment for many Nigerians, you know, because just last week, you know, we had the cases in Nigeria where 2 or more members of the P&ID had been sentenced, you know, for offenses, you know, that committed in the process of getting that thing signed. And one would like to ask, how would the Nigerian government now pursue the case of ensuring that the judgment that we had from the UK court does not hold, you know, because now from what Kingsley read in that newspaper, of course they are beginning to target their, you know, the assets, Nigerian assets that they intend to perhaps grab and recoup their money.
Yes, PID in the P&ID in the process of trying to recover the $9.6 billion awarded it, filed the arbitration award to a UK court and also to a US court. This is to enable it to seize what it determines as Nigerian assets worth that amount. But what has happened from the case you referred to in Nigeria is that 2 Nigerian directors of the company had already pleaded guilty because the processes of registering that company, the processes of following due process for winning the contract, in fact, the PID was not even registered to do petroleum business in Nigeria. So they are trying to probably gather data and evidence to present to the UK court that you cannot play something or nothing, because the genesis from where the contract started is here in Nigeria, and already there's a court ruling that is going on because persons who are involved already pleaded guilty.
All right. Let's take
okay, now I wanted to bring in Kingsley here to share from your wealth of experience, you know, in legal matters of this nature, because what we're saying that there's a criminal offense in the process of getting that contract established in Nigeria. That is what has been established.
What is important at the moment is what the federal government delegation is doing in London. That's to say, to engage their counsel, present new facts, and then seek to set aside the judgment that has been awarded to P&ID. And just saying that P&ID is part of the argument will be a non-existent firm, and that it was an illegal contract, and so and all of that. So we'll get to see the details once they have worked out what is there that they are pleading, or that they will plead before the courts.
All right. So, now let's go to Leadership newspaper. Federal government targets 3 million barrels daily crude production. It's on page 5. And then the lead story here says 5 trillion AMCON debt. Federal government may bar debtors from holding public office. It's on page 4. Well, it has 2 writers to that. Say to send list of obligors to INEC, then people of questionable character shouldn't contest elections. That's according to Ola Terugu. Now, Army launches special operation to weed out Boko Haram remnants. At the bottom of the Leadership newspaper, we have some stories there. Controversy trails Environmental Council registrars continued stay in office. So on page 2, PMB departs Abuja for 74th hunger. And now, federal government stakeholders chart way forward for automotive industry. It's on page 30. Now, Senate on same page with PMB, says Ubasani. That's on page 5. Let's bring in Bayo again.
Well, the president arrived in New York yesterday, and he is due to address the United Nations General Assembly tomorrow, Tuesday. He's scheduled for Tuesday, and he's listed as number 5 to address the United Nations General Assembly. However, the theme for this year's General Assembly is galvanizing multilateral efforts for poverty eradication. You will recall that Nigeria has announced a program of getting 100 million people out of poverty within the next 10 years. That is an uphill task, and probably the president will be addressing the hunger on it. Another portion of it is the quality of education. Again, we have so many millions. At the last count, some states registered about 3 million out-of-school children, and therefore the challenges of getting them back to school and providing quality education is something that will also be there. The third leg probably relates to climate action. You recall also that the president has always made it a theme of his address at international fora, recharging Lake Chad so as to restore the economic activities around that area. And one doesn't need to be a prophet to predict that the president will harp on that to the whole international community when he addresses the hunger tomorrow. Meanwhile, the report that you read about AMCON, it relates to the presidential panel set up to help AMCON recover its debts. And at a seminar over the weekend, a suggestion was given to AMCON, and AMCON says they are likely to follow it. And that is to say that if persons are hoping to seek political office and they are indebted to AMCON, they should seek INEC and the EFCC to preclude them from contesting, because it is provided for in the Constitution that people with criminal records or that are not legally free should not be allowed to contest elections. Another aspect of it is that for those who already are in public office or maybe in the National Assembly, the corrupt agencies should follow them up and ensure that they are tried.
Because it would have amounted to a misnomer, for Nigeria to ignore the fact that somebody has a criminal case hanging on him, still in court, and such person is contesting election, and not only contesting election, winning election, and getting him or herself back to another leadership position. I mean, if the decision can be followed to the letter, and then it does seem that we are beginning to think positively with respect to the issue of a contesting election and producing leaders, that have questionable character in this country. It has happened over the years.
Unfortunately, that's not the position of the law.
Yes,
and it's not the position of the Constitution. The fact that you are a debtor does not mean that you will be unable to pay your debt. What the Constitution provides for as a bar to contesting office is a person who's been convicted of fraud, an offense of fraud, a person who is of unsound mind, and a person who is an undischarged bankrupt.
What about somebody who...
See, undischarged bankrupt. Before you become a bankrupt, you would have been owing. So it's your inability, it's your inability to pay that now makes you, for you to be technically bankrupt, and then you have not been discharged from that bankruptcy, you cannot contest. That's what the Constitution provides for.
What about those whose cases are still pending in court and are contesting election? That is one aspect of it that is very interesting.
No, it's pending.
Because we must not have everything in the Constitution. We could have norms and values that we have to, respect when it comes to the issue of leadership.
I can understand the basis for what you are saying, but the powers cannot therefore be assigned to INEC or EFCC to preclude a contestant from an election on account of the fact that a contestant is facing trial, or the person has, some commercial case which hasn't been concluded.
Clear yourself first.
No. What the Constitution says is specific, and in this instance, an undischarged bankrupt. That's what it is. Okay, very quickly, please. There's a story at page 5 of the Punch newspaper.
Yes.
Page 5. We can't get that on the screen. It says Igbo police declare small witch wanted for robbery. So the Imo State Police Command has declared a suspected, dreaded armed robber and cultist, Ebuka Ukachukwu, popularly known as Small Witch. Now, the statement was issued in Owerri by the police command.
Okay.
So if it's a big witch, what will they do?
Talking about terrorism now, the theater command of Lafi Adore has now embarked on a new operation. This operation this time is positive identification. And this as a result of the fact that the Boko Haram and ISWAP have taken on serious bombardment and they are fleeing, they are on the run. Some of them are heading towards Sudan and Central African Republic, and the armed forces, in collaboration with the multinational joint task force, are pursuing them. However, there are those of them that are taking refuge within Adamawa, Borno, and Gombe, and therefore the operation positive identification is a stop and search, and therefore persons who are going through those states are advised to carry the identity card because they are going to search to make sure that they track down this. And they have also warned citizens who harbor such runaway insurgents. They will be treated as insurgents.
And the good news here is that the army is taking the fight to them.
Yes.
All right, Kieran and Bayo, we of course are done with our newspaper review segment. We'd like to thank you for being around. We'll see you again tomorrow. Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with economic matters. That is to say, discussing matters arising from the conclusions of the Monetary Policy Committee of the CBN last week.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
To the outer framers, the hat tippers, the fringe goers, you don't need to hide anymore. Try Dettol Even Tone. It cleans and helps to reduce the appearance of blemishes caused by oil, dirt, and germs, giving your skin a healthy feel for an even better you.
Introducing the new Dettol Even Tone Pink Glow. Healthy skin feel for an even better you.
It is here again. The NTA ETV Annual Expo is here again. This time, it is the 13th edition. 2019 has as its theme, promoting unity and innovations in youths as agents of change through science and arts. It promises to be captivating as youths across the nation showcase their unique skills and innovations in science and arts, make new friends, and showcase their rich cultural heritage. Join us at the NTA Headquarters Arena, Area 11, Garki, Abuja, from Sunday, 28th October to Thursday, 24th October, 2019. For more information, participation, and sponsorship, please call these numbers. NTA TV, promoting learning.
Where's your mom? Today is her toilet day.
What? Helen! Toilet day? Tomorrow you're hosting a party and it's a matter of my reputation. Even if you spend your entire day cleaning with all this, it still won't be party ready. Impossible! Challenge? New Ticker Harpic 10X. Even if you use this solution 10 times, it won't give you the same cleaning like Harpic. Its new Ticker formulation sticks to the bowl better, removes old stains, and gives you a sparkling clean toilet. Wow! New Harpic 10X gives me the freedom from toilet day. New Harpic 10X for 10 times better cleaning.
Well, we thank you for staying with us on the program up to this moment. This is a Good Morning Nigeria, and the discussion segment is actually going to be focusing on matters arising from the CBN Monetary Policy Committee resolutions against the backdrop of developments in the global and domestic economies. And to kickstart the conversation, here is Chimobi Walter Naji with a background report.
The 269th meeting of the Central Bank of Nigeria Monetary Policy Committee rose from the meeting retaining the monetary policy ratio at 13.5%, asymmetric corridor at plus 200 and minus 500 basis points. The CRR was retained at 22.5%, while liquidity ratio at 30%. The Governor, Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, also commended the efforts of the federal government to increase value-added tax from 5% to 7.5%, stating that this will improve revenue for government. The governor also used the opportunity to clear the air on the issue of the implementation of deposit charges on bank deposits above 500,000 naira for individual accounts and 3 million naira for corporate accounts, saying the policy is in line with government cashless policy initiative and will be implemented nationwide on the 31st of March 2020.
The MPC also noted the government's current drive to increase value-added tax, adding that this will improve fiscal revenue to support expenditure and reduce the budget deficit and government borrowing when implemented. Committee noted that this was too little to close the gap in government finances. Consequently, the MPC called on the government to, as a matter of urgency, adopt what it termed a big bang approach towards building fiscal buffers by purposefully freeing up redundant public assets through an efficient and effective privatization process.
The Monetary Committee also noted that the continuous global trade tensions is responsible for the slow economic growth witnessed both locally and internationally.
All right, thank you very much for that background. We have guests with us at studios in Benin and Lagos and also here in Abuja. Here with us in Abuja, let's welcome familiar face Dr. Emeka Okengo, is a development economist. Dr. Okengo, pleasure to have you with us on the program today.
Thank you very much for
All right, and joining us from Lagos Network Center, another regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, is Shuaibu Idris. Shuaibu Idris is a financial analyst. Is right there in the middle of your screen. You can see him in his jacket. Shuaibu, pleasure to have you with us this morning on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Kinsley, and good morning, Nigerians.
Okay, and then to the right of your screen from our Benin studios, Professor Mike Obadan. Professor Mike Obadan, of course, is a professor of economics and also a member of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Prof, delight to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Studios, Professor.
All right, Kieran, well, let's begin while we sort out the audio from our Benin Network Center.
Yes, actually, we were supposed to begin with Professor Michael Baden, who is a member of the CBN Monetary Policy Committee, until we tidy up his audio at the beginning end. We will get to him. But for now, let's begin with the man with us here in the studio. Now, you have heard that the CBN has retained 13.5%, of course, as the determinant for also interest rate in the country. Nigerians believe that the committee must have considered so many factors before retaining that 35.5%. But in your own understanding, is it right, or would it all go well for the nation's economy to retain that 13.5%?
Thank you very much. In giving a straight answer to you, I also like to take it from a little bit of another angle. If you don't include that part of the story, you might not have a whole. Is it also right for us to also juxtapose your monetary policy with your trade policy? Is it also right to juxtapose your monetary policy with your fiscal policy, so that it can be able to have a whole? Because if you look at the position of the CBN, they touched on these little aspects, you know, when they were talking about the involvement of the subnationals, okay, and then when they were talking about, you know, getting the states to begin to now enter into, you know, public works. It's very, very important that when you're discussing why the CBN is retaining or not retaining, to also now look at the reasons they gave. Okay, at the international level, they were talking about, the IMF projections that were no longer panning out. They were talking about the trade wars between China. They were even talking about, the real sector, the insurgencies that are going on locally that are also now, affecting the prices of goods and services. And at last note, they were saying, okay, if we tighten, this will happen. If we're losing, we're going to be facing inflationary rates. And they gave the reason why. Because you don't have a real sector that can actually match, what you call your private sector. So what am I saying in all? I think what we should take away from what the CBN is saying is that we need to be able to get a little bit more robust in thinking our country through. If we are going to be, getting a policy that is going to be working for everybody. And in doing so, I think it is time right for us now, for government to actually begin to look at, two very key policy areas or policy focal areas of development. One is our exclusive list, and two is our concurrent list. Because you cannot be having a real sector, okay, that is not tied to your whole. You cannot be having subnationals now running their own thing. And this is where you now have a totality of what I call your fiscal policies. So until you're able to align your fiscal policies and develop one, with your monetary policies, and then have what you can now call fiscal discipline, you might not be able to get it all right.
No, but I mean, Okengu, just before we go over to Lagos, let's face it, the business of the central bank is monetary policy. Fiscal policy will relate to essentially Ministry of Finance and indeed the government itself. But the CBN ordinarily will be cognizant of what is happening on the fiscal and trade side. But in the case of their resolutions at last week's meeting, there seemed to have been no tension between the fiscal policy of government and, of course, the resolution with regard to NPR, which had come again to VAT, which is one other aspect. There seemed to have been no direct tension. Was there?
I'm not talking about tension. I'm talking about relationship. I'm talking about juxtaposing. Okay, I'm talking about interrogating. I'm talking about aligning. All right, there's no tension, and you cannot get a proper bat with one hand. You cannot be talking about, the monetary policy in a silo. There has to be a relationship. It must be interconnected, and that's what I'm saying. That if we're going to be having, and you see, when the CBN now talks about the role of government, the role of the subnationals, they are actually, interrogating the fiscal policies of government. And they were saying, listen, it's important that state governments now begin to now directly engage, in public works. Okay? Because there is this, tilt towards the real sector that is not existing. So what they are basically saying is that you must be able to create your real sector if you are going to be creating that fiscal part of what it is you need to do. And then what are you doing? Not using your fiscal policies to be able to now measure your monetary policies. It doesn't pan out, it doesn't sit.
Okay, Rebecca, thank you. Let's go over to Shuaibu Idris in our Lagos Network studio. Shuaibu, let's have your initial salvo on the resolution of the MPC with regard to the retention of the monetary policy rate at 13.5%.
Thank you, Kingsley. I think the Central Bank and indeed members of the Monetary Policy Committee were faced with fundamentally two alternatives and not necessarily the usual three alternatives. The alternatives before the MPC at every meeting is either to hold on to the rate, loosen the rate, or tighten. In the last meeting, the committee was faced with two alternatives, either to tighten the rate or to loosen or to hold on to the rate as it were. Why were there two alternatives? Number one, the government at the center has just inaugurated the ministers, and we are expecting that budget implementation will not only start but will be fast-tracked, and therefore there could be enormous amount of spending which could possibly impact inflation. And on the other side, part of the option that we have was to hold on to the rate. Why should we hold on to the rate? Because the previous meeting, that is the July meeting, the rate was set at 13.5%, and the impact of that decision is gradually manifesting in the economy. What do I mean? If you look at the Purchasing Managers Index, it has marginally improved from 57.2 to somewhere around 57.8. The Purchasing Managers Index is a good indicator of the performance of the real sector. What is the manufacturing sector doing in the economy? Number two, inflation has marginally reduced. Yes, the target inflation by the central bank is 6% to 9%. We're operating at about 11.2% now as at August, which is marginal reduction from 11.8% in July. So in totality, you will realize that the stakeholders in the economy, and indeed analysts, have been positing that central bank and indeed the MPC should hold on to the rate instead of tighten. If you look at the vote, if you review critically the position of the 9-member committee, about 3 of the members did suggest that the liquidity ratio should be increased, which would have meant tightening. Some others felt that the cash reserve ratio should be increased. So 3 of them suggested an increase in either the liquidity ratio or the cash reserve ratio, which would have made the MPR, which is the rate of 13.5% currently, that it would have marginally increased to probably 13.75% or even 14%. When you again juxtapose the decision with the international development in the economy, the Brexit issue, the China-US trade war, these are issues that are impacting negatively on the international economy. The skirmishes or the shenanigans between Iran and US, between Iran and Saudi Arabia, again, these are issues that are impacting negatively on the international economy, which is subduing the performance of the international economies of the world. These are issues that impact, directly or indirectly in Nigeria, and therefore the central bank and the Monetary Policy Committee, I think, took the right decision by holding onto the rate instead of tightening. That is my thought.
Thank you. We'll definitely come back to you in the course of the discussion. But now, let's go to Benin. We have been told that we can now talk to Professor Mike Obadan in Benin, and I also hope that he can hear me clearly. Professor Obadan, in attempting to manage the economy of a nation, there must be set targets by government. Failure to achieve such targets would naturally trigger a shift in monetary policy. And now, from your meeting of last week, it's already known that you are retaining a 13.5% policy ratio. Now, what is the rational expectation or the hypothesis that, of course, led to your decision to stick to 13.5%?
Ratio. Now, what is the rational expectation?
Thank you very much, Kirian. I hope you're hearing me now. Well, let me say that the Monetary Policy Committee took several factors into consideration, both in the global economy and in the domestic economy, in arriving at the policy decisions that it took last week. At the global level, uncertainties, vulnerabilities, and tensions have continued to permeate the global economy, with negative implications for global economic growth, which in itself also has implications for Nigeria's growth prospects. The tensions have had negative implications for global trade, and of course, the volatility in global financial markets was taken cognizance of. And then very importantly, as far as the Nigerian economy is concerned, the volatility in crude oil market and the crude oil prices, which have not been favorable to the Nigerian economy. Now, those key factors at the global level have had the implication of making global economic growth to remain sluggish and low, to the extent that the International Monetary Fund has downgraded the global growth projections for 2019 to 3.2% from 3.6% in 2018. Then, of course, the volume of global trade has also reduced. In fact, global trade volume recorded negative growth in the first quarter and second quarter of this year, largely because of the trade war between the United States and its major trading partners, particularly China and Europe. Well, these have very important implications for the Nigerian economy. When the global economy slows down, as it is now, the demand for Nigeria's products, crude oil and all that, also reduces. And the volatility in crude oil prices has not been favorable to Nigeria. You found that the price, the OPEC reference basket price has decreased, in the last 2-3 months from an average of $64 per barrel to about $60 at the global level. Now, that in itself is not good news for Nigeria, when we also consider that the brand of crude oil that is of interest to Nigeria, that's burning light, has not also performed, well in the oil market. For example, it stood at $68 per barrel in July, and by September, it recorded about $60, $59, per barrel. That is not good news, for Nigeria in terms of budget performance, in terms of external reserves accumulation, and in terms of exchange rate stability, because you need the foreign exchange to be able to do all that I've mentioned. Now, at the domestic level, what are the factors that were considered pertinent? Number one, the very fragile, low, and uninspiring growth rate of the economy. The growth rate, reduced, between first and second quarters. But between second quarter last year, 2018, and second quarter 2019, there is an increase in growth. That's on year-to-year basis. But the important thing is that the growth rate, the level of about 1.9% in the second quarter, is still too low, in relation to the economy's potential, and in relation to the needs for massive employment in the country, the need to reduce poverty. So that is a very important factor that was taken into consideration. Then, of course, the level of external reserves. External reserves of a country provide the means to pay for international goods and services imported, to settle debt, and of course to also maintain exchange rate stability. Now that the crude oil market is been wobbling and not favorable, then definitely you find a situation that the external reserve stock of the country has witnessed some depletion in the last 2 months, and it is not desirable that such a trend should be allowed to continue. I heard one of the contributors mention the issue of inflation. Yes, the rate of inflation has shown a downward trend. That is good news, for the country, because as one of the contributors also said, the primary objective of the central bank is to maintain price stability, monetary stability. So when the inflation rate is going down, is good news. But the inflation rate achieved so far is still above the single-digit target, of the bank. And so something must, policy actions should not be taken to, reverse this favorable trend, on the inflation front. And now, in taking decisions, a contributor rightly pointed out the various options that were considered, either to, losing monetary policy stance, that is in terms of reducing the monetary policy rate, maybe tinkling with the cash reserve requirement or liquidity ratio, or, tightening, monetary policy with a view to further checkmating any possible adverse movement on the inflation front. Where the other one, of course, is to hold. That is to say, do not change any of the parameters. The important point considered here is this: the economy, desires to grow more than it is doing at the present time. So the obvious suggestion would have been, let us, ease the monetary policy stance. But you see, that in itself has implications, because it could lead to, increases in liquidity in the system, and that one will undermine the objective of inflation control.
5 minutes. Okay. All right, Professor Michael Badan, thank you very much for your initial comments, but I still would like to stay with you, this time shifting the issue from MPR, which you have already explained, and to which the other guests we have with us have also spoken. But let's come to one other aspect. What emerged from the MPC meeting was the support, as it were, announced for the proposal to increase the rate of VAT, which is the value-added tax, from the current 5% to 7.5%. And the rationalization given for that, that's to say from the MPC now, to the effect that it would enable financing of budget without government resorting to borrowing. Would that be a good rationale in the ears of the public?
Well, it should be, Kingsley, for the simple reason that the government is not a magician that can conjure up, funds to implement its development programs that will be beneficial to the citizens. The government, can finance its programs either by raising revenue through taxation and some other sources, or go borrowing. Now, the public debt situation at the present time has been adjudged even by stakeholders as very high, because the size has increased significantly, and the implications for debt service payment is also there. So, and you require revenue to service the debt. And debt service today takes, about 25% of the total federal government budget. And in terms of the interest payments, interest revenue ratio or debt service revenue ratio is very, very high. And so, we have to be cautious of further accumulating public debt. So the other option then is for government to raise revenue. Well, of course, I've heard arguments that, well, the government should overhaul the administration of its tax system rather than, increasing tax rates. Well, that's a good argument. But that may not yield, immediate fruits as to have enough revenue to implement programs. So VAT obviously is a kind of low-hanging fruit which government can exploit. The increase is from 5% to 7.5%, and if it's effectively implemented, it will yield reasonable increase in revenue to all tiers of government, and that one will reduce the need to further increase the public debt stock. And remember that yes, citizens complain about the impact, but as it has been implemented so far, the VAT has tended to exclude most goods and services that are consumed, by the poor. And so, they may not be significantly affected, and I agree that prices of certain goods are likely to rise. But that is the nature of public policy making. There are costs and benefits in public policy making. When you have certain benefits, like more revenue, it can lead to certain costs. But the important point is the balance between the costs and benefits. And when the costs, are lower than the benefits, then the policy should be implemented. So I think the basis for the support of the increase in VAT is that if the government is able to increase its revenue substantially, there will be no need for the huge fiscal deficits which are accumulated by government, which in turn put pressure on the central bank or monetary authority to accommodate, thereby worsening the liquidity situation and the rate of inflation in the economy. In other words, if government is not able to mobilize enough revenue through VAT and other sources, then the fiscal behavior of government may tend to undermine the attainment of the objectives of monetary and price stability of the central bank. So that is the major reason why the central bank is of keen interest. It has keen interest in what happens in the fiscal sphere of governance.
All right, thank you indeed. Let's bring in Dr. Kingu. I'd like you to actually make comments with respect to the issue of a 7.5% VAT increase, because monetary policy is pervasive. It affects all sectors of national life. And to add to that, policymakers are set to contend with the impact lag. That is the delay which occurs when a policy is enacted, the delay between the enactment of the policy and of course the impact of the policy on the economy. Some say that the deposit multiplier process takes some time to stabilize and work itself out. Now, what should be the length of time required for the impact of such enactment to, of course, impact on the economy?
Well, I think let's start with a very simple argument so that everybody can follow us. We are talking about more revenue for government. I remember that we're also now boasting to have the largest economy in Africa vis-a-vis human resources. We have a market of over 200 million people. Okay. What that means is that if you're able to get 40, 50, 30% of those people to contribute to your revenue stream, it would be a very large economy. Now, and it's important for us to also recognize that one of the biggest and most sustainable sources of income generation is from social investments. Okay, Prof had mentioned that part of what they want to do is that it's not going to be affecting the foods that poor people eat. I didn't know that we started producing a line, because I know that poor people eat rice. I know that poor people eat Gary. I don't see what is exclusive for the so-called poor, and who will be poor anyway. For me, there is nothing wrong with borrowing. There is nothing wrong with going to borrow money to be able to develop either your social sector or your infrastructure or support your businesses. What I think is the problem, like I keep saying, is that we've not been able to properly align, one, our trade policies, two, our production policies, three, our fiscal policies, four, our monetary policies, in the light of our social investments. If we did that, Kirian, what government will be worried about is, do we have a program to be able to lift some certain percentage of Nigerians out of poverty? Because what that technically means is that if we lift, government has proposed to lift 100 million people in 10 years, okay, which is about 10 million people, every year. Now, if that happens, if you have 10 million people paying taxes, contributing to government revenue, you might not have any need to increase taxes. Now, I'll give you a closing. Ghana, which is next door to us, is abolishing everything, every tax, from their VAT to whatever. They are saying taxes are a major inhibition, okay, to development. What it is we want to do is to first and foremost look at those policies that can be able to make certain that people can come and do business here. And this is why some people are giving you even tax holidays to be able to come and do stuff. Now, it's actually a noose. And if you're not very, very careful, okay, it can become a very heavy leash. Now, if you overbody it, we don't even have, I don't know if there's been any scooping study, on the state of our manufacturing sector. But if statistics coming out from man is anything to go by, we are not doing so well there. And why are we not doing so well there? Which is one of the reasons that the central bank gave. That if you now allow for us to begin to focus on valorization, which is what it is we have here, and you are not looking at the real sector, which is where everybody is technically, we might be having a very major issue. So I think what is critical for us to be able to get out of this is not to look at it from this simple silo of the CBN monetary policy. We must build what we call a national development framework that captures everything we need to be able to say we are going to be getting 20 million new people into the tax net based on payee. Now, but what we've done with our social investment programs is that we've thrown fishes at people. Okay, we've given handouts, we've given tickets, meal tickets, and we're not even giving these meal tickets to support our local industry. So you find that almost everything that goes into our social investments are now supporting, goods that are coming from outside the country. We've not been able to take a firm stance as a country to say, at the subnational level, for instance, we are talking about agriculture. Is there any policy? Is there any framework? Is there any program that ties every state government to the national agricultural development policy of even any product? Now look at the NLTP that we're talking about now. Okay? In one breath, government, beautiful program. But because you've not been able to tie it holistically, from research, okay, to market, we have not been able to turn it into a business. You don't see where the private sector, is posited clearly in that project. And I can tell you for an instance, I'm sorry I'm digressing because this is a little important, okay? You can just through forage, the last Minister of Agriculture kept talking about importing grass, okay, to be able to feed our cattle. We can create a 10 trillion economy by just growing forage to be able to support the NLTP program. Now, this is where policy can begin to meet business. And that's what I'm saying to you. But for you to be able to grow this 10 million, you might be requiring about 500 and something thousand hectares of land, which are the subnationals. So until we create this seamless, framework that allows us to be able to now see where monetary policy begins to now monitor our physical programs, we might be having a...
All right, okay, that's a brilliant idea that you just captured there.
It's very important because you can make the policy, but how does it impact? Because it affects all sectors of our national life.
No question about that. And part of saying well, we're not discussing the livestock transformation program here, but if you have to grow grass and then turn that into an industry, you also have to work out the transportation arrangements where people will come, carry the hay or whatever it is, or the stock, you know, take it to the livestock wherever they are located, and then you stop the itinerant movement, at least considerably. Thanks a lot, Dr. Okengo. We'll return to you. You've not had the opportunity of speaking on the support of the CBN for the proposed increase of VAT. You talked about that philosophically, but let's return to Shuaibu Idris in our Lagos network studios. Shuaibu, you listened to Professor Michael Badam explain, you know, what the Monetary Policy Committee had in mind in lending its support to the proposal to hike VAT from 5 to 7.5%. But take a look at some crucial numbers. Now, if we are looking at the debt stock, what value is the increase likely to make in terms of federal government receipts? Because if you look at the receipts from VAT, the federal government gets only 15%. State governments get 50% and local governments get 35%. Now, this is net of 4% of 4% normally as set aside for collection. So federal government is the least recipient of revenues from VAT. Why therefore should the federal government be pushing all of this at a time we are also talking about implementing the new minimum wage?
Thank you, Kingsley. You see, one thing that I thought our elder brother, Professor Obadan, should have touched in the area of the comment made by our dear brother, Dr. Okengu, on the near absence of symbiotic relationship between the fiscal and monetary policy of the government. I would have thought, you know, taxation being under the realm of fiscal policy comes in from the Federal Ministry of Finance, and it is clear because there was a relationship and there was the two hands clapping between the central bank, which is in charge of the monetary policy, and the Ministry of Finance, which is in charge of fiscal policy, and that is why even the central bank or the MPC was talking about the increase in VAT. But be that as it may, I think the increase in the value-added tax is a step in the right direction, Kingsley, if you ask me. Why is that? If you look at a trajectory of the countries of the world, to my knowledge, there is a country that charges up to 50% as value-added tax. In today's world, there are only two countries of the world where VAT is 5%, Nigeria and one or two others. Now, 5%, how equitable, how realistic is that? Yes, Ghana has tinkered with either value-added tax administration, but was it abolished completely, or was it tinkered with and some aspect of goods and services were, you know, exonerated or excluded from being, you know, tax, you know, or collection of VAT on them? I think that is what Ghana has done. I was in Ghana quite recently, and I did see that a number of services, a number of goods being bought and sold are being taxed VAT. Back to your question on the issue of the ratio of sharing. Kingsley, if you have 100 naira in your pocket and I'm entitled to 15% of that 100 naira, that will come to me at 15 naira. But if I am sure to increase, or I push that the money in your pocket for which I will be entitled to 15% gets to say 1,000 naira, what will that 15% that will be to me comes to? That is 150 naira. Now continue to move, you know, the cake and see if you bake a larger cake. Yes, the Federal Republic of Nigeria or the central government will be entitled to 15%. But then, the larger the cake, the better my 15%. And to link it to the current debate on of the 614 billion naira the federal government is trying to recover from the state government, and the various state governments that are not able to pay salaries and running into the center for one handout or another. Again, when you increase VAT, and the state and the local governments get larger share, what would that mean? It will mean the burden on the center will be reduced significantly, and the loans or debts that the state government and the local government have taken from the center could easily be paid. Today, you know, the Ministry of Finance is saying every state government that is indebted, either through one way or another to the federal government, those states must be states must pay those debts. How are these states going to pay the debts? You know, Dr. Emeka did allude to the fact that the subnational unit of the economy appears to be operating independent of the center, and there is a bit of a silo kind of operation. Unless otherwise we find an avenue to help, you know, the state government and the local government, the center may not be able to hold collectively, and the economy may not be in the right direction. So in totality, I'm of the opinion that it is quite right to increase value-added tax, but at the same time, we should also look at what Dr. Emeka said. There is need to widen and broaden, you know, the number of people that are collecting, are paying tax. Nigeria is probably one of the lowest countries with the GDP, tax to GDP rate, because we do not have anywhere near any of even the smallest African country tax GDP rate. I think our tax to GDP rate is around 5 to 6%, when other countries like even Ghana, the tax to GDP rate is somewhere around 16%. I mean, if you compare such ratios, you realize that there is need to fundamentally do the two actions. Number one, increase the VAT rate. Number two, you know, push up the federal revenue to get as many as possible that we can get under the tax net, and not just the federal inland revenue, but the state boards of inland revenues or internal revenues, so that we can get more people to pay tax, so that the national debt will be lower. And when the national debt is lower, then we will be able to use the revenue to provide the citizens with dividend of democracy, as we always say.
Oh, okay, Shuaibu Idris, thank you very much for your point. But just before we return to Mike Obadan in Benin Network Center, let me bring in Dr. Emeka Okengu again, still on the issue of VAT. Now, other than just saying value-added tax, I mean, ordinarily, the meaning of value-added tax is the value addition at each stage of production or distribution of an article that's a good or of a service. But I mean, when you look at virtually every item that you are, it replaces sales tax, it replaces all kinds of things, and people are just wondering, on the basis of the question that I posed to Shuaibu Idris, that look, if you increase VAT by 2.5%, as it were, federal government will get 15%, as it has always got, and from where are you going to get that? You are talking, CBN, in talking about his monetary policy, was saying he was looking at the domestic environment. You see, sluggish growth, the international environment is also not very favorable. So where do you expect the production to come from that you can reap in bountiful harvest from an increase in the VAT on goods and services?
You know, first, it's important for us to also decouple the word manufacturing. Okay, or production, because I use the word valorization, where you can just add value to a good that's already coming in as a product, and then you begin to now start with that good coming as a product as your raw material. I'll give you a very typical example with resins that you use in making plastics. Now, resins are byproducts of petroleum that come into this country as finished products, but starts the process of production as raw materials that you use in making your plastics. Now, if you add any value to that, what it is you're doing is actually now increasing the patronage to the people who are the original producers of that goods. And that's why I keep saying that for us to be able to get this right, my big brother professor is very right to say you can increase VAT. I also agree. However, who are able to pay now? And what are we paying on? On what goods or services are we paying this? And how many of them are local? Have we been able to support any industry from research to production? And everything we're using, both instrumentation, both capital injection, both human capital, both machinery and equipment, come from our local sources. Have we been able to do that? If the answer is no, then what it is we're actually doing is promoting, what's key, Kieran and Kingsley, for me, is that if we had done a little scoping study to say in Nigeria we have 10 lines of manufacturing. I had a little bit of expert with a producer here who says, okay, I am producing tomato. And I said, if you're producing tomato, have you also now gotten to the point where you're also now producing your packaging materials? Because that's where your costs go to. Are you in touch with anybody who's producing metals, who's producing plastics, who's producing it coming from our refinery? Okay, either through our gas or through our crude oil. So the issue of increasing tax, it's okay. But who is paying? And at what cost? How much are they borrowing money to be able to pay this tax? Because you see, by the end of the day, you find out that the Manufacturing Association says to you, more than 60% of our members are no longer producing. So what are you taxing? What are you increasing this VAT on?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kengu. Professor Michael Bada, you now have support of other two guests, on the issue of the increase of VAT. But there are very pertinent issues raised along the line, and one of such is the issue of manufacturing in this country. Most often, some experts describe Nigeria as a non-producing nation. What about science, technology, and innovation that is driving all other aspects of our human life today? And if all these are not factored into monetary policy, which of course we agree is pervasive, then we are taking a wrong step. But my question will be, I'd like to take you back to the issue of the impact of monetary policy on the economy, because the problem of lags suggests that no government is certain about the result of whatever policy it is putting in place until it is put to test. Now, how would government deal with this kind of uncertainty? Because of course we have known the policy now, but it is not certain whether this policy is going to, of course, bear the fruits that it was designed for. What's your take?
But I may humbly request that you recast your question. It doesn't seem to be that clear to me.
Okay, to make it clear to you, I am talking about the impact of the monetary policy on the other sectors of the economy. For instance, the manufacturing sector. And another is that Nigeria is not known to be a producing nation. Some say that we do not have any international product. Now, if monetary policy is pervasive, when are we hoping to have the impact of this policy on the economy?
Thank you very much, Kirian. Yes, you are right. Monetary policy is expected to influence positively development in the economy, particularly in the areas of prices, exchange rate, monetary conditions. It's also expected to positively affect, the real sector of the economy through making funds, money available to private enterprises to execute their business activities. And the area that monetary policy comes in there is to try to influence credit to go to the private sector enterprises and at affordable rates. But because of the nature of the economy at the moment, which is still in a stagflationary situation, whereby you have high rate of inflation coexisting with very low output. You see, there is a policy dilemma, in that respect. So central bank, on the one hand, is striving to achieve monetary and price stability. On the other hand, is also striving to ensure that credit goes to the private sector of the economy. And there are signs that the monetary policy actions have been yielding some positive dividends. I give you illustrations. Because the central bank is not able to get the monetary policy rate lower, in line with public expectations, it had devised several unconventional or heterodox monetary policy measures to ensure that credit, goes to the real sector of the economy. That is the basis of the various initiatives of the central bank to make credit available to certain aspects of the real sector at single-digit interest rates. You recall the Anchor Borrowers Program targeted at agriculture, production. We have the Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises Fund aimed at providing financial support to those categories of enterprises. And we have other schemes, Commercial Agricultural Credit Scheme, and there are, of course, special interventions to the power sector, textile, and some other sectors. And recently, the bank, was quite concerned that the commercial banks are not delivering credit as desired to the private sector. And so, a policy relating to the proportion of loans to total deposit of banks was put in place, such that as of today, that ratio is 60%. And before now, the banks, that proportion is about 55, 57%, compared to over 100% loan deposit ratio in some other countries. In other words, that actually deliver credit to the private sector. So there is evidence that as at September 2019, the loan to deposit ratio of the commercial banks has edged up to about an average of about 60-point-something%, which means that the commercial banks are responding, to the policy action, of the central bank. So, in the area of agriculture, we are all witnesses to the significant improvement in the area of production of rice, and the initiative is also being extended to other agricultural commodities. And so you find that over time, production should increase in certain areas, certain commodities. And so the impact is generally favorable. And again, the central bank, in order to further encourage the commercial banks to lend money, we recall that it's possible that by lending more money, the proportion of non-performing loans may increase, while encouraging the commercial banks to do due diligence in giving out loans. There are also initiatives by the central bank to help the banks to de-risk, that is to say, to lend at minimum risk. One of the recent initiatives is the global, standing instructions, by which, a commercial bank would, a prospective borrower would enter into an agreement with a commercial bank to get credit, and in case of default, the commercial bank can recover its funds from any account in any other bank, in the country.
All right, Professor Michael Badon, thank you very much. Shuaibu Idris in Lagos, thanks also, and Emeka Okengu, thanks. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll take some tweets and then get into the last leg of the conversation.
Can I see your particulars, sir?
Officer, my particulars no dey here.
In that case, you'll have to come with me to the police station.
Officer, which levels? Where I for find you something make you take arrange your weekend.
What? Offense number 1, driving without particulars. Offense number 2, trying to bribe an officer of the law.
I won't harass Nigerians or take bribe. Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, you're welcome back. And it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We have a number of tweets now. Kira, let's go over those tweets very quickly.
Okay, now let's begin with Sani Michael or Michael J. Kenya now has the best cashless economy in Africa, having used the right models to implement the policy. From investigation, Nigeria can implement this policy without imposing heavy taxation on the poor masses. All that needed to be done is to introduce laws, not stringent policy.
Festus Akimboyewa, the public should have been engaged in the last 3 to 6 months on plans to increase VAT. By that, such an announcement wouldn't have been met with so much hoopla.
All right, from Omobola Babs, on the cashless policy, Nigerians are always resistant to changes. Recall when the issue of daily withdrawal and ATM threshold of 150,000 naira was introduced, we all went against it. But today, everyone is better for it.
All right, Mike Ayankwo has a tweet. It says, we need a cashless system in this crucial period of national development. Many superior arguments have been advanced in favor and against the fallout of the Monetary Policy Committee meeting. No matter what, a cashless system will curb inflation, reduce incidents of robbery, kidnapping, fraud, and unnecessary costs. It will encourage financial institutions to develop and invest in modern technology.
Yeah, it does seem that all our contributors are focusing on the cashless policy.
That's right.
So does Lasisi Taufik Taiwo. Cashless policy should be applicable to few Nigerians having millions and billions in their deposit accounts. Otherwise, the general masses will be further impoverished.
Now, Law Alpha C, the cashless economy is the way to go, considering the many security and financial fraud bedeviling the polity. If you do not want to be surcharged by making counter transactions of 500,000 and above, then you know what to do, or you ask to be told how it's done.
Yeah, Prince Vikade has a different opinion here. He says this monetary policy will not work. It will discourage people from taking their hard-earned money to the bank.
This is from Badamasi Haruna Adamu. What we need at the moment is how to remedy the two evils of poverty and unemployment. However, introducing a policy without creating the conditions for its success could ultimately create problems. CBN cashless policy is one of the well-intentioned but poorly handled policies.
Steve Bond, CBN needs to explain in clear terms to the layman. Nigerians can't afford further deductions of their hard-earned cash. If the government needs more money, then the cost of governance should be reduced. First, our senators earn highest in the world. Their allowances should be cut.
Dele Jack Solomon, we recommend that CBN should explicitly provide wide-ranging and accurate information on monetary policy, data on key variables relevant for policy decisions, and macroeconomic model used for policy analysis in a timely and more frequent manner, I believe.
Let's take this one from Festus. I think it's the second time. Let's just take it. In this digital age, that's from Festus Akimboyewa, the pursuit of cashless system by CBN is a game changer as the amount Nigeria is spending on printing money and transporting currencies will reduce greatly. It will also help to curb corruption and money laundering.
Okay, now those are the tweets that we have. Let's go over to Shuaibu Idris in Lagos. Shuaibu Idris, of course, considering your deep background in banking, what's your reaction to the surcharge that has now been introduced for deposits, cash deposits above 500,000 naira? I'm sure you've been following the arguments in the country since the CBN introduced the policy and it took off, I believe, last week. Some persons have said, look, why don't you just close down the marketing department of banks, since when deposits come, they have a surcharge of 2% on that amount, and then it's good business for the banks. You pay money to a bank, they charge you. You withdraw money from a bank, they charge you. In the meantime, there are challenges with the cashless policy. I'm sure you are also aware of the electronic fraud that is taking place. Some bank customers are having their accounts wiped out by the Yahoo boys. What are your thoughts?
Kinsley, thank you very much. You've already let the cat out of the bag, because you told listeners that I am a banker. But really, I'm not supporting the policy of the, charging or surcharging customers, with large withdrawals because I'm a banker. I'm supporting the policy because I feel very strongly that it is well-intentioned, given a number of factors. Number one, I think the banking sector in Nigeria is one of the most developed sectors of banking in the world. Today, from your handset, you can transfer via the USSD code up to about 250,000 naira. I give you a personal example. The last Eid al-Kabir celebrations, I bought rams, on the spot on Salah Day, and to the Malam who sold the rams to me at almost 270,000 naira. There and then from my handset, I did the transfer. Now, you will imagine a ram seller may not even have a bank account or may not be able to know what is an alert or what have you. Yet, the gentleman got an alert and gave me my rams, and I took them home. So therefore, technology, whether we like it or not, has taken over the realms of our lives, not just the financial sector. You can also transfer via the internet through the, what we call the internet banking. Why will people then be carrying large sums of cash? People will say that this policy has not been well thought out, but this policy has been with us for the last 10 years. This policy started with the Lamid Sadusi era. Emefiele came in and decided to suspend it or partially suspend the policy, but now it's been reintroduced and it will be followed to the letter. There are advantages of going cash light. Number one, the financial policies of the government, the monetary and fiscal policies of government will only be better and will be more impactful if the larger proportion of M1, that is the money in circulation, is within the banking environment. If people will be able to just keep 2 million, 3 million, 10 million in their rooms or safes or in soccerways or in the ceilings, that will not augur well for this economy. When people talk and people continue to scream and scream and scream, you will realize that how many of the 200 million people that we have in this country can move 500,000 naira in a day from a bank account? Of the 200 million, I bet you, Kinsley, there are less than 50 million that will be affected by this rule. And those 50 million are people who are educated, who can use the internet banking or the USSD means of transfer. I'm happy that one of the contributors did allude to the fact that the cost of printing money. Do you realize that one of the worst countries that we have on planet Earth where we misuse our currency is Nigeria? People write on the currency, people mutilate our currency, and the central bank, and indeed the federal government, is spending enormous amount of money to print this currency. At whose expense? At your expense, at my expense, at the citizens' expense. Is that right? Should we continue? Should we allow that to happen? I think it is important that we all key into this cash-light policy so that the government and indeed Nigerians will be better off. And finally, last week, the central bank came out with a clarification. A lot of people thought if I transfer 552,000 naira to Mr. A, I will be charged 2% of 552,000 naira. The central bank came out with a clarification to say the percentage of charge will be on that 2,000 naira in excess of the 500,000 naira. So people must be enlightened, people must be educated so that we stop, explaining things out of context and trying to denigrate a system that is well-intentioned, well-tailored, well-coached out, and indeed the structure we have today can support that cash-light system. And I think it is better for this country that we implement it to the letter.
Well, from from the experience we've had over the years, when it comes to implementation, that's where we begin to experience some hiccups and difficulties along the line. But of course, same last week, National Assembly has, of course,
House of Reps.
Yeah, of House of Reps, rather, we had just asked the CBN to stay action yet, until further explanations. And from what Shaibu has said, there's a need for further explanations on this policy before it goes into implementation. Let me bring in back Dr. Kim Weir, not necessarily on this cashless policy. There are 4 known monetary policy tools globally. If I may mention them, discount rate, reserve requirement, open market operations, and interest of reserves. How much of these tools, in your opinion, have been observed before the CBN came up with the 13.5% and all other resolutions they came up with after the meeting?
Well, I'm still insisting that you mustn't look at this thing from the perspective of the CBN alone, because some of these things you're talking about would have been captured in your trade policies. Some of these things you're talking about would have been captured in even your industrial policies. Some of these things you're talking about would have been captured in your legal frameworks. Okay? Now, it is based on this. You must be able to interrogate the fiscal policy of the Ministry of Finance. And I think that this conversation would have been better held if we had had an inaugural meeting of the new Economic Advisory Committee. This is where we should also have looked in if we had the time to do so. Now, with them, and then when you now have the National Economic Council, how are they going to be synergizing? Okay, who is going to now be presenting or producing, this fiscal policy? Okay, if CBN is not a member of that new advisory council, to what extent are their roles going to be advisory? Are they going to be technical, or are they just going to be advisory? So it's not a yes or no question. Okay, it's a question that requires a lot of deeper thinking. But I think what is critical for us is that and if you allow me to just maybe put in a word or two there is nothing wrong with cashless policy, but there's everything wrong in not understanding that 99% of your economy is on the underground. If you don't capture that underground economy, okay, Big Brother Shaibu had talked about the ram person. I am certain he didn't go to Megeteri to go and buy those rams. I am certain you have been in a cosmopolitan area like Lagos or probably Abuja or Kaduna. I'm sure this didn't happen in a small village in Katsina or Maiduguri. Okay, but again, if I haven't said that, you also still have these Osusu people who are carrying their off-grid, machines to even go to those places to be able to transact. I think what is critical is for us to be able to build the proper infrastructure, the social infrastructure. This is where the Rural Electricity Agency comes in. Remember, we had a program called the Rural Telephony. This is the time for government to be able to interrogate it. Remember, we had a program called the Rural Electrification Program. Now, the moment you're able to go to these markets where people are able to use these machines to buy yogo, to buy ose, to buy okra, to buy this, to buy cherry, then you begin to now get citizens involved. Because trust me, you'll be surprised that when you go to the ATM now, which has become quite popular, some of them just take, very simple codes that they can remember. I was in one and I was quite shocked, and impressed. A woman came in with her ATM, couldn't speak one word of English, and then she was telling somebody, Kasamini zero, Kasamini zero, kuma, Kasamini zero, who did in 0000, and she was able to pull her money. It is because that infrastructure is available to her. So it is not enough for us to be able to look at
people. Was that the password she was giving
Yes,
out?
that was the password. She said somebody should help her. You know, but she had 1111. No, it's not a shame, sir. What it is that you can actually now start educating people when you have the proper infrastructure.
Who is that person that was assisting her with the password? That's the point. That's why I said it's a shame.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah, that's because if the person goes away with the password, next time she comes back, they say no cash.
Let us start well, sir. For me, for us to grow Nigeria, we must understand that out of these 200, I don't even think we'll have up to 20 million people who can do transactions of 500,000 sustainably over a period of time. That's the truth. But those of us, we should be able to look at the bulk of our citizenry. This is where the economy of Nigeria is. If we can get 70% of the 200 million, or 70% or 20% of those who are in those economic gaps to be able to contribute to our growth, we will be better off for it.
All right, Emeka Okengu, thank you very much. Kirian, if you recall, there was one other aspect of the MPC resolution, which has to do with the proposed sale of so-called redundant assets in order to generate more revenue for the government. I doubt if we have enough time to get into that. But Professor Mike Obana, would you speak to that very briefly? Considering the, as some persons will say, non-salutary outcome of privatization over the decades, why is the Monetary Policy Committee urging the government to put on the block so-called redundant public assets?
Thank you very much, Kesley. Well, I think the issue here is how to enable the government, federal government in particular, to raise more revenue, be able to finance its programs, and in the process, implement projects that can impact poverty positively on poverty reduction and then employment generation. And if that is to be achieved, then more revenue has to be raised. So I think the bank drew attention to the fact that there are numerous redundant or abandoned assets all over the country that could be sold, revenue generated, in the hope that those who buy them will not balkanize them, will not strip the assets, will put them to good use, which can also contribute to employment generation, poverty reduction, and so on. I think that is the whole lesson. It's just one of the several options that can be explored by the government to generate more revenue to finance its development programs.
One would even think how much is going to be realized from those redundant assets we're talking about. When we're talking about the funding, the budget and the economy, it's quite a huge sums of money, and their sources must be established. I don't think, from all he has said, that those redundant assets can, of course, give Nigeria what it requires in terms of funding its programs, developmental programs. Well, we have come to the end of this conversation for today, and we'd like to appreciate all our guests who made it possible for us to, of course, dissect the very important topic that we deliberated on this morning. And first, Dr. Emeka Okengu, who is with us in the studio. Emeka Okengu is a development economist. Thank you for coming.
Privilege to be here.
And of course, in our Lagos studio, we've had Shoaibu Idris, a financial analyst. Thank you, Shaibu, for being part of our show this morning. And of course, from Benin studio, Professor Mike Obadan, member, CBN Monetary Policy Committee. Thank you all for being our guest this morning. For now, let's take sports.
Nigeria now face a demanding test in the bid to make it to the 2020 African Nations Cup Championship. after the home-based Super Eagles suffered a heartbreaking 4-1 defeat to Togo in the first leg of their final qualifying round fixture in Togo on Sunday evening. The home Eagles started the game brightly and took the lead in the 10th minute through Ibrahim Sanusi. The home team equalized in the 16th minute through Richard Nani. Nani doubled the Hawks' advantage in the 67th minute following a long period of pressure. The third goal from the spot in the 75th minute, while Angoro Ashraf got the fourth deep into stoppage time. The home Eagles, who reached the 2018 CHAN final in Morocco, will now need to win the return leg in Nigeria next month by at least 3 unreplied goals to go through to Cameroon 2020. In tennis, Japan's Naomi Osaka ended an 8-month title drought by winning the Pan-Pacific Open in her home city on Sunday, her first trophy since her second consecutive Grand Slam triumph at the Australian Open in January. The former world number 1 overwhelmed Russia's Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova 6-2, 6-3 in just over an hour to make it third time lucky in finals at the tournament after finishing runner-up in 2016 and 2018. As the Japanese won a perfect 100% of her points when her first serve was successful and batted down 4 aces. She became the first Japanese player to win the Pacific title since Kimiko in 1995.
All right, thank you very much there for the sports update. We'd also like to thank you for tuning in to Good Morning Nigeria. The program is back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, do have a lovely day ahead. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Kieran Umayo. Thank you for being our guest, and of course, stay away from trouble.